This just in. We've just confirmed the identity of a new rare disease called the Addison's disease. Don't be surprised if you haven't heard of it. It's what's called an orphan disease, and it affects only 1 in 100,000 people in the US and only 200,000 people worldwide. Today we have two highly acclaimed scientists here to tell us more about this disease. More about what an orphan disease is?
Yeah, sure. Orphan's disease is a term for rare diseases that affect only a small percentage of the population. Usually these rare diseases do not have a large market for research and funding.
So why don't they have a large market?
It's basically because it doesn't affect the population that much. So companies don't pour all of their funding into research since they oftentimes won't make a profit even if they come up with like a cure, something since it's such a large, like a small percentage of people, and it's just not worth it. It's business. There are some institutions, however, such as the U.S. Orphan Drug Act of 1983 that allows government to help pour some of their funding into these companies in order to push forward research for these orphan diseases.
Can you share more about the history of Addison's disease?
Yeah, of course. Addison's disease is named after Thomas Addison, a British physician who first described the condition in 1855. Unfortunately, despite the long time since discovery, there hasn't been sufficient research. The gene of origin that's been linked is the human leukocyte antigen complex. The most likeliest variation of this gene is the HLA-DR B1 variant, which is known to trigger autoimmune diseases in general. But the mechanism of why Addison's disease is particularly triggered is unknown.
What is Addison's disease?
Yeah, so Addison's disease is an autoimmune disease. An autoimmune disease is a disease in which the immune system mistakenly attacks healthy body cells. Your body basically gets brainwashed and starts to fight against itself. Addison's disease attacks the adrenal glands, which creates and manages the vital hormones and makes our body function. In particular, the adrenal glands are broken into the inner, medulla, and outer section, cortex. Cortex is the target of the attack when the immune response is triggered. The cortex is responsible for the important family of hormones called corticosteroids. Addison's disease involves these three corticosteroids. One of them is glucocorticoids, which is food to energy, immune system response, stress response, and inflammatory response. Another one is called mineralocorticoids, which are sodium and potassium regulation, which is also called blood pressure related. So the lastly for the corticoid family is androgens, which are sex hormones and muscle fat regulations. Other diseases that also involve these are called hypothyroidisms.
How would one know they had this disease?
Yeah, so symptoms are often ignored until they're triggered by sickness or stress or injury. Symptoms are usually triggered around the ages of 30 or 50 and progressively get worse throughout life. Symptoms include extreme fatigue, hypoglycemia, loss of appetite, weight, muscle joint pain, abdomen pain, nausea, depression, maybe even sometimes hair loss, cravings, and also maybe even darkening of the skin. All of which are common side effects of hormonal issues.
If it's a trigger that awakens these symptoms, can it potentially be avoided?
It cannot be prevented. It is linked to genetics, but the pathway to inheritance is unknown.
What happens once it's triggered?
Yeah, so once triggered, patients enter what's called the life-threatening state. In this state, patients will experience fading of consciousness, low blood pressure, low blood sugar, a spike in potassium levels, confusion, weakness of the body, pain, cramping throughout the body, all of which are due to the adrenal failure caused by triggering Addison's disease.
What can be done to help those who are triggered?
Yeah, so treatments at this point are only at the emergency room. Those affected are usually given doses of synthetic corticosteroids, hydrocortisone, prednisone, or fluptocortisone, to make up for the hormone deficiency caused by the adrenal gland failure. These corticosteroids will then need to be taken for the rest of the patient's life.
The rest of their lives?
The rest of their lives.
So how dangerous is this disease?
Yeah, so the truth is, without treatment, this can often result into death. The hormones affected help regulate much of the body's biological systems, and without them, these systems fail and can no longer do what the body needs them to do. We sincerely urge those that are feeling unwell to seek proper help and medical advice.
Well, that was very enlightening. Thank you two so much for sharing and educating us today.
Yeah, no problem. We're always happy to educate on this rare disease.
Yeah, of course, happy to help.
We now have a special guest on the line who has had personal experience with this rare disease.
Hi everyone, my name is Juliet. My dad actually suffers from this disease. It's a pretty rare disease, as we've been learning about so far. It's also one that really affects people, as we've learned so far. My dad first got it when I was 6 years old. I found him, well, my family found him collapsed in the hallway, which, you know, pretty traumatizing. Anyways, so we sent him over to the ER room. It actually took 15 hours for the doctors to figure out what was wrong with him. A lot of the symptoms that he has reads as kidney failures. A couple of the doctors were saying that they needed to rush him into surgery to get rid of his pancreas, which obviously is not the cause as we know now. Because it's so rare though, a lot of doctors just don't study it and it's not taught in classrooms. So my dad actually said something that one of the doctors picked up on. One of the rare symptoms of Addison's disease is salt cravings due to the lower levels of sodium, as we've discussed earlier. My dad said to one of the doctors that was near him that he'd do anything for a bag of Fritos. And that triggered one of the doctors to remember something from a textbook he read in medical school. So that doctor actually saved my dad's life, because when they went back to look it up in the side room, they looked up all the symptoms and found that he did indeed have Addison's disease, and they went back and pumped him full of fluktocortisone and prednisone and hydrocortisone, as we've discussed earlier. And then he went back to normal. His blood pressure was actually somewhere around, his upper number was somewhere around 30 to 40, which, as everyone knows, is practically dead. It's important to study these rare diseases. I know some people in this room will probably go off to become doctors. And so when you're going through the textbooks and you find something that, oh, that's interesting, maybe remember that. And it's good for people to research these smaller diseases, because you could save someone's life someday. And fun fact for everybody, all the dog owners out there, certain dogs also have an affinity for Addison's disease. My dog, who's a standard poodle, can also get the same disease as my dad, which is kind of an interesting fun fact and sad fact at the same time. So for all you dog owners out there, go ahead and look up and see if that could possibly affect your furry friends. So thank you for asking me to input my voice into this video project for channel 151 News, and I will send it back to Fiona.
Thank you to Juliet for sharing that with us today. This has been channel 151 News, the channel that channels all things chemistry. We hope that you learned something new today and that you felt the chemistry between me and you. Until next time.